comment that if you'd like to interrupt, feel free to just raise your hand, take yourself off mute and talk over me. I'll stop eventually. Really, it's okay. Or type in the chat window. I'll keep an eye on the chat window. And Carrie, if you see me missing something in the chat window, just holler at me. So I have a little presentation that I've created for you. Let me just share that and get some feedback that y'all can see it. If anybody can just give me a thumbs up. Good. All right. Good. Good. Get to presentation mode. Awesome. All right. So let's see what I'll tell you today. As we mentioned, Carrie and I went down this path of Jade Lending because about a year ago, we were watching the pandemic happen and also feeling like we've just been left out of being able to get funding. And if it's bad for all women, it's even worse for minorities and minority women. Less than 5% of all small business lending goes to women. That's just appalling, but there it is, right? Oh, by the way, we're more than half the number of small businesses as women. 90% of women and minority owners were shut out of the PPP program, which we really could have used. 85% of women and minority-owned businesses believe they won't survive the next 6 months. That's what the survey that was done in the beginning of this year. So we've struggled and we're struggling hard and we just don't feel like we're getting there. And again, Carrie and I are trying to figure out how to solve some of this, but we just wanted you to be aware of where we are. Less than 1% of startups are funded by angel investors. And we all hear a lot about angel investing and venture capital. Less than 0.5% are funded by venture capital. This is for all startups, not women's startups. It's that same fraction of that for women. It's a fraction of that fraction. The Small Business Administration funds 1.43% of startups. And in contrast, about 57% of startups are funded by personal loans and credit. Carrie can tell you her story. And 38% receive funding from friends and family or self-funded. That would be mine. So we started Jade Lending, which is a social impact lending platform. Our mission is to support and fuel the growth of women and minority-owned businesses. We believe that supporting women and minority-owned businesses and helping them succeed, that is our purpose. We concentrate on the 99% of women and minority-owned businesses that are ready to sustainably grow, but they need the financial support to do so. Our investors in Jade also offer a network of advice, resources, and referrals to our borrowers. And so I'll tell you a little bit about that interesting construction of our organization. And then lastly, I want you to know that our primary measure of success, our success of Jade Lending, is the growth of our supported women and minority businesses. Jade Lending is comprised of investors, that is, people that are willing to lend their money to Jade Lending. So we borrow from people who have succeeded. Today, all but one of our borrowers are successful women, and they lend us their money for 5 years, and we return their money after 5 years with interest every year. So 5% interest compounded annually is returned, which is about 33% return on a 5-year investment with Jade. If that sounds familiar, that's like the market, and that's the whole idea, is that we don't want people who are investing in Jade or investing in other women and minorities to take a risk in their own retirement. So feel free to move your retirement investments, which are risky, to the same level of risk, we hope, as Jade Lending. Then we take those dollars and over the next 5 years, we lend them over and over again to women and minority-owned businesses at a variety of interest rates, but enough to generate the revenues that we need to pay back our interest to our investors. So our point is not to make tons of money for investors. That is not our purpose. Our purpose is to make tons of money available for people to be able to use so that they can grow their businesses. So the first talking point for all of us, and because of the way the screen's working here, I can't always see your face. So please feel free to just interrupt me because I can't see a hand wave, or have somebody read to me the chat window because my screen has taken over itself here. Cash flow is always the key to the business. If you are in business for yourself and you do not believe this, just repeat this every morning that you wake up. It's all about cash flow. It doesn't matter about profitability, because if you can't pay your bill that day, you're out of business. It doesn't matter how profitable you'll be tomorrow. So here's a question for you, and I'll just ask you, because I can't see that. Let me see if I can throw this up. Maybe. Okay, here we go. There we go. Maybe I can see that. So I can see the chat window now if I stick it over here. Think about, what was your source of initial capital for your business? In the case of Carrie Peel, it was credit cards, lots of them. She maxed them all out, but she got her business started and then she paid it all back at 22 to 23% interest. For Lynn, it was went out and pitched to venture capital groups and got nothing back, zero. Nobody wanted to fund me. So I ended up funding everything myself. And so I'm fully self-funded, which often comes from the standpoint that I have a good mortgage on my house too, and that's self-funded. Go back to my slide. And now the question is, so what are you going to use today? So Carrie might still go back to her credit cards. Many of us have gone through the SBA and have succeeded or not. So many of the women that we've recently lent to in this past year, as Jade started, tried all of the common ways to get reasonably priced capital and were shut down. One woman that we lent to has been banking with the bank for 28 years and has had all of her money, $1 million business, passing through there, and they rejected her loan. The SBA took months and months and months to get to someone. They had POs that they wanted to be able to satisfy. The SBA can't help you with that. So you need a source of growth capital, and it needs to be ready when you are. So here's a bigger question. I may even take this off just so I can see faces, if I can figure out how to do that here. So how many of you, let me see if I can blow this up. I want to just look at faces if I can. How many of you, with a nod of your head, believe that you should be debt-free in your business? There's 1, 2, 3, 4.
Looks about 50%.
Maybe a 5. Okay. How many of you, with a shake of your head, think you should not be debt-free? That feels strongly about that. Okay, Angela. All right, Sherry. Sherry knows the deal, right? So here's the thing. Here's the thing, right? This is the part that Carrie and I are now experiencing, and we talk to more and more women. And it really comes back to a level of risk, or maybe how you were brought up. So Carrie and I can reflect that at the age that we are, and with the parents that we had, who came in from some other country, perhaps, or haven't been here very long, we were encouraged to never borrow. That if you ever borrowed, it was for your house, but never anything else. You save up for that car, you drive it for 10 years, then you buy another one because you've saved up again. That you don't have debt, because that makes you secure. And as a person, that may be fine. As a person, that might be fine. But if your business is debt-free, that means you have no excess cash to be able to grow. And you can't grow without cash. That's just, I'm going to prove that over and over again. You need the cash to grow. So unless you can leverage some money somewhere, you're going to be unable to take advantage of the opportunities that come. One of my favorite phrases is, luck favors the prepared. Luck favors the prepared, because luck is happening all the time. Just sometimes you don't get lucky because you weren't in the right place with the right time with the right stuff. So if something comes along and drops in your lap as a big opportunity and you have no cash to take advantage of it, that could have been luck taken advantage of, or it could have just been a missed opportunity. Being debt-free means you have very little flexibility in whatever cash you have. It would be like saying, you know, I want you to save up for that house. So don't buy a house till you have enough money to pay cash for it. Oh my goodness, we'd never be in our houses. We'd be handing people rent all the time. It's the same philosophy. So if nothing comes through to you after this conversation, it is to go back and look at your situation and where you have debt and understand whether that's good debt and valuable debt, or debt you probably ought to pay off, which really comes down to interest rate. So if you can make more on that dollar in just a mutual fund in the market, then you should have it there. So interest rates for houses are 3.5%. The market's averaging 5%. Oh my gosh, put all that money in the market, that everything you can, and pay your 3.5% and earn 5%.
I'm curious, Lynn, with a show of hands, how many of us grew up with a mom and dad that said, you know, be debt free, don't buy it unless you had the money? You know, grandparents sharing the same thing. How many of us had those? I knew, Steve, you had that.
Yeah. And while that was maybe good advice at one time, if you are a business owner, not an employee of somebody else, it is not a good philosophy. It is going to hold you back. Right. Right. I'm going to get rid of you. So this really just talks about risk, right? So can you tolerate risk? Can you tolerate ambiguity? If you're a business owner, you already know that you have some level of tolerance for risk because you don't know everything. And every day that you get up, it's a little bit different and you have to handle it as it comes. So you're already at that point. It's really, again, a question of, am I tolerating the right levels of risk? So growth costs cash. The faster you grow, the more cash you're going to need. You need to have inventory, employees, equipment, a space. If all you do is just simply, if all you do is just incremental growth, that is, the more sales I have, the more I can spend, you're going to have incremental growth. And when that new PO that comes in, that's a step change from where you were before, when that new client says, I'd like to hire you for something bigger, but I'm going to need 2 more employees to deliver that, how will you take advantage of that opportunity? Because you'll either have to have a lot of cash just sitting, not invested, but just sitting, right? You might be able to put it in investment, but you're going to have to sell those at whatever position they are to get the cash back out. Or you just are living hand to mouth. So that was my first conversation, was just around cash flow. Okay. You have to be able to leverage. If you are feeling really uncomfortable about leveraging someone else's money, know that the source of that money can come from various places, right? So there's venture capital and there's angel investing, neither of which are going to be highly available to you. And both of which come with the idea that you're going to have to sell some of your business to someone to get that. And the only way they're going to get their money back out is if you sell the business eventually to someone else. If that is not your purpose in life, and we don't meet many women who are really trying to build a business that will eventually be sold, which is the value of a venture capital or an angel investor. I need to make sure that I'm jumping in on a business that will eventually make so much money that someone else will buy it and I can get out and get my position back out in some unknown day in the future. Then angel investing and venture capital isn't for you. We've got to find another place to get the money. That's typically debt, right? You borrow. All right.
A question for you, Lynn, before you move on.
Yep, please.
Where does a line of credit fall into this equation?
So a line of credit is an open-ended loan, which you choose to use or not. It is a beautiful thing. I love lines of credit if you can get them. Lines of credit typically come from banks. Banks do lines of credit when they see that companies have lots of cash. If I have lots of cash, then why do I need a line of credit? Well, yes, because banks are the most conservative about taking risk with their money, and they don't want to take a risk at all if they can avoid it. And they have lots of people overlooking at what they do to make sure they don't do anything really out of whack. So your line of credit is probably going to be secured by collateral. That is stuff that the bank could then take from you if you don't pay back the line of credit. Collateral means that your mortgage is a collateralized loan. Your mortgage says the bank owns your house, and your bank will own your house until you pay the very last bit of that debt off. And even if you own a teeny tiny bit, it can be really painful if you don't pay that, because they're still going to want to take your house, even for that teeny tiny bit of the last 5% of the house that you have to pay for. So collateral is just you saying to the person who's lending you money, I've got something you can take instead. Your car, when you get a car loan, is collateralized. They will take your car away if you don't make your payments. Just the repo man comes, right? But in your business, the same thing happens. So if you need to put collateral up for the business, then what is that going to be? Does your business own a building? Might be that if it's not already a mortgage. Does your business have equipment that can be sold and cashed out? If you are an online business with a few people that work for you, what do you have as collateral? Almost nothing. So you can't offer that. So a lot of businesses today that are not brick and mortar don't have that. Even businesses with inventory, the inventory is usually not a valuable collateral piece, right? Because who wants to sell off whatever it is that you're trying to sell? If you couldn't sell it, they don't want it either. So the liquidity of the piece that you would offer as collateral is a challenge. Thanks for that, Stephen. That was a really good question. So back to, how do I get money without having to put up collateral or, my house or whatever, those other things in terms of collateral? How do I get this kind of cash? You might have investors that will come along with cash, but we'll talk about that just at the very end when we go back. There were 2 other topics I wanted to cover today that I promised. One was about pricing and one was about negotiating. So I just want to hit these pricing points, and I might hit a nerve for somebody, and then I want you to just ask about it. Okay. So I like to think of myself as the queen of pricing. And there's a bit of that queenliness, when I do have negotiations with people, I tend to put myself in a place where I really want to understand my strengths and be regal about it. I'm not a pushover. I just bought a car this weekend. It's a really interesting, ugly story for the car dealer, but we'll save that for another time. I love those things, by the way, and it was just such fun. And I got a nice, really nice car out of it. But when you're talking about pricing, the biggest piece about pricing, and again, I'm going to lose you guys to visual here, is that you need to be competitive, but that doesn't mean using your competitors' pricing. So if your pricing for your product or service is tied to whatever somebody else who offers something like what you do, but never exactly what you do, because that's not you, then you're following the competitor. You're not leading the competitor. And you might both be leaving a lot of money on the table, especially if you decide that you want to buy business by lowering your price to get more of it. And then you have the race to the bottom, where the bottom falls out, nobody makes money and everybody gets out. This is never a good practice, ever, ever. So if you find your competitor lowering their prices to get more of your business, you will have a different tact than to follow them down. Please call me and don't do it. Just don't do it. There's a lot of approaches to doing that. Just don't. The flip of that is, and I've been in businesses where I came in as the lowest price when I bought the business, and afterward I was the highest priced product in the market. Competitors following you up. Ah, what a wonderful thing. Competitors that will follow your pricing because they want to make more money too, and they're not really going to try to exceed your pricing because they still want to be less expensive than you, but you're going to prove why you're still a better value even at a slightly higher price. And that means you got to know who you are and why you're different. So ask yourself this question: what is your customer real alternative to what you do and provide for them? The real alternative, not the one that plays in your head when you're sleeping at night and you wake up in a sweat, right? Not that one. What is their real alternative? Name the customer in your head and say, what if tomorrow they couldn't get this from me? What would they do? What truly would they do? In many cases, they have no alternative because the switching cost is so high that they really can't change. And if you've managed to establish yourself in a place where to switch to something else is extremely expensive, this big barrier you have to get over before you can even get to something else, then why, oh, why are your prices so low? Because they can't switch. And it doesn't matter that the thing that they might switch to is so much less expensive. The switching cost is so high that it's almost as if that competitor doesn't exist, at least not until you get to some really dramatic point. So please don't leave money on the table. Don't feel like you're doing people a disservice. Make sure that you're collecting value. There are only tiny windows of time for which you can price for it and get the market to pay for it. If you miss those windows, you don't get them back. There's plenty of inflation, deflation periods happening, and you cannot do that. So while you can, you reap while you can, and then you adjust as you need to. Because if you don't, again, in the lean times, you have to live on something. Yes, question.
So Lynn, this is where Carla comes in. So Carla's business is the plumbing business. So her and her husband, Dan, have a very successful plumbing business. How many of y'all have tried to get a plumber? We live in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is the second fastest growing city in the United States, only behind Austin, Texas. So the only reason I get Dan to my house is because I know Dan and I know Carla, and they've been very good to me over the years. But they're in a profession right now that I'm sure that if Carla had 25 Dans with plumbing license, that she could keep them busy 60 hours a week. So this is where this comes in, as know your.
And yet, Carrie, when we call to get a plumber, we hear from folks like Carla and others that are in that industry that they can't raise their prices because then they'd be more expensive than the other people. What do you mean? It's really a matter of demand at the moment, right? So if I have to literally wait 4 weeks for a plumber to come out for a non-crisis action on my house, 4 weeks, how much am I willing to pay if they'll come out in 2 days? In my case, a whole hell of a lot to get it done. I'd pay twice as much. I'm not a price sensitive buyer. But many people, especially in the service industry, believe that everybody's price sensitive. And they treat them all as if everybody's going to balk at the price. That's not true. So please feel free to have different offerings. We'll talk about this at the end, but have different offerings with different price points for different buyers who have different affinities for how much they'll spend. So there's often, if you come out at night as a plumber, an extra charge or on a weekend, because of course people weren't really working. So it's completely understood that if I have to do something extraordinary to get a plumber to your house, you're going to pay me more, and you'll be willing to because your house is flooding right now, or you don't have a toilet that runs. Sure. But if I'm also well off and just don't want to deal with waiting for 4 weeks and need someone, and I want to pay that same fee, why can't I get to the head of your line? Who says you can't? Why wouldn't you? Oh my gosh, right? And how long will this last, where we don't have enough of the service that we need? So there's a high demand and low volume availability. I don't know, but until it does, that's how you charge for it. Because anything else is just doing your business a disservice. Nobody's going to thank you so much for being a kind person later. Just, that's not how it works, right? And you're not going to get more people to become plumbers if nobody makes any money as a plumber. So make money.
You know, Carrie, thanks for saying that. And, you know, you hit on a good point, because we were doing competitive pricing. And what we found out very early on after being new is we were so much lower. Yeah, we got a lot of business quick, but then I had to reevaluate and say, hey, why am I undercutting myself? So this is a very good point.
It's always about the bottom line, how much you're
So,
making.
and a big part of this is also about volume, right? So there are fixed costs that you have in your business. You can't buy a fraction of a plumber. You can't necessarily sell a fraction of a product. So there are fixed levels of cost that come in every time you add an increment of volume that you can provide as capacity, right? So every time I get to be able to sell something more, I just can't sell one more and add one more iteration of cost. There's usually a lump, right? So the biggest piece of this is covering those fixed costs. And then after that, well, that's pretty much all profit. So while you have these fixed costs, you shouldn't just be trying to cover costs plus a margin. In fact, I should probably put that on the list. If you have cost-based pricing, okay, let me just call me. We're going to have an intervention. Please, please, please do not relate your cost, what it costs you to deliver, to anything that you charge to others, except when you decide to increase your price. Feel free. But when you're basing your cost on that, your pricing on that, price is all about the value to the end user. It has nothing to do with the cost to generate it and create it. So hopefully your costs are low enough that you make money when it goes out to be priced to the end user. But how much that is can be measured in a 10% increase over cost to 10-fold, right? So if you're in jewelry, your markups are 10 to 20 times cost. If you're an automotive manufacturer, your markup is 10% over your cost on average. So wide ranges of this. There are no right answers. The right answer is how much can you get at this moment in time so that you have sustainability for your business in the future, right? So you can charge everybody 300 times more, but then you're going to close your business down as they all leave you. So I'm talking about sustainability as well, but while you can, you should price for that. You should also have consistency in your price increases pick a period. So every year annually is typical for many businesses, but some may need to do it quarterly, some may need to do it monthly, depending on what businesses they're in, but you need an annual cadence. Why do I need to do that every year? What if I haven't really had costs that changed over each year? Because every time we go through an annual cycle and you have an agreement and the customer knows a price that they've been seeing for a year and they don't see a change, what you have telegraphed to them was, all of my costs might have gone up, but I had plenty of margin to eat that, so I won't increase my price. Now they start wondering, how much margin do you have? How much are you making on this? You make them actually wonder how profitable you were last year if you didn't need to increase your price this year for any raw material costs or labor costs, of which we know we have, right? So we're 5.6% increase on average, right? Yours might be very different depending on who you have to pay and what you have to pay for, and if it's coming from China or it's steel from Italy, right? All of those things might change how that goes in terms of your costs. But if you don't adjust your pricing every year and you don't get your customers to anticipate that the price won't be the same price forever, so they might not want to wait, then you'll have lost an opportunity again. How do you react for requests for discounts that Carrie and I will always ask for every time? We're always going to ask. How do you react to that? If somebody asks, do you then offer it? Which is actually what I've heard people say. So if you don't ask, I won't offer you a discount. Some people will offer a discount even if they don't ask. Okay, that's what is your pricing then if you're going to be offering a discount? When is it appropriate to even discount? Ever. If you have a business that has a large variability in the amount of things you supply, like the time, the hours of a service employee, or lots of unit variation. So here's somebody will buy 10,000 units and somebody will buy 100. Then please have variable pricing for volume. That's perfectly appropriate. If you're going to buy 10,000 units from me and take delivery this year, I'm going to give you a different price than for 100 units. Because I am, right? There's a lot of scale associated with that, and I really want that piece of business. And so I better be darned competitive. But I don't have to like bend over backward and give you everything. I'm going to give you a volume discount. And if you wanted to argue more about that, I'll even have a conversation about that. But we'll have a contract in place at the end of the day if I'm giving you something more than just a small percentage off of my total sale. Because we'll want to have some guarantees. If I give you this price, you won't move the business to somebody else for X period of time. I'm going to get something in return for that discount. But I'm not going to just say, oh, yeah, you're a really nice person, so I'll give you a discount. Friends and family, use that as you have to. Be careful what you get for that too. But otherwise, there's just no reason to offer a discount unless you have a reason to. And are you regularly negotiating everything else in your agreement besides price? So there's a lot of other terms that go along with this besides what it costs, how you deliver it, how you pay for it, how they refer, how many times they buy a year, whether they have warranty claims, whether you do any servicing on it. Just a lot of other things go along with just price. And we'll talk about that in the next thing when we talk about contracts. All right, so if I've made anybody nervous about their pricing, that's great. And then you need to go think about it, because every dollar you leave on the table right now, you're not going to see next year. It's only available right here. You take them and collect them now. And oh, by the way, when you need that cash flow to grow, this is a good way to start growing it without borrowing from anybody, without having to collateralize anything. Go get the money from the incremental growth and make sure it's enough that'll keep you going. Okay. These are my ideas that are going to come up here. You can write them down. I give them as gospel truths when I advise. So if you're going to do a contract, if you're going to sign a contract, these are absolutes, right? First one is to never, and never sign anything you haven't fully read and understood. Okay, yes, there are these things that show up on websites that say, click here if you've read and understood our rules and regulations on using the site. And the alternative is, I can't use the site. So of course you say, sure, because it really doesn't matter. No, by the way, they won't hold water because no money transacted there. So there's nothing there that you can sue them or they sue you for, but so click that. But if you're putting something together that says, this is a supply agreement, or this is my contract with you for services, and they've put something in front of you, you need to read it fully and understand it. That's what the guy learned that I was going to do at the auto dealership this past weekend, when I said I wanted this done to be done in 10 minutes. And then he put stuff in front of me, and then I proceeded to read every single word that was given to me electronically. And then after I signed all the electronic docs, they said, now we're going to sign them on paper. I said, well, that's just dandy. I'm going to read them all again, because I don't really know that this thing that is electronic is what I'm going to read on paper. So I'm going to read it all again. And in fact, it wasn't, which was really fun. So read everything. Don't sign it. Doesn't matter how long it takes. It's never going to be so long that isn't worth it, because you don't want to have whatever you haven't read. Absolutely. If you haven't read it, you really don't know. If you can negotiate before a contract is written in any legal form at all, please do that. So if you've got two people getting together and saying, hey, maybe we should do this, and this would be my offer, and this would be how you would respond, and you can write them down in bullet points, agree to all the bullet points, then give it to an attorney to make it into a legal document. When you start a legal document, then your only alternative is to read that big ugly thing. And if you don't understand it, to hire someone to read that big ugly thing with you to make sure you understand it. So don't start with all of that. Start with the basics of the agreement and make sure those are agreeable to you. And then once you have that, you build the document around that, and that's still embedded and nothing surprises you. Next one. Do engage in a lawyer if you're uncertain about anything you've seen, but please don't let the lawyer negotiate for you. Don't let them set the rules. They actually probably won't if they're a good lawyer. They'll just tell you what your options are, but they'll tell you very strong language. This is risky, because lawyers by nature are paid to be able to de-risk things for you. So they don't want you to sign up for anything risky. Wait, the whole purpose in being able to make money in a business is that you have to be able to manage risk. If you don't like to manage risk, you can't be in business. And therefore you have to take on some risk and make sure that the risk is worth the benefit, period. So they're going to advise you to not do this, 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 and this. But at the end of the day, it's your choice for a business choice. And it's your business choice. If you let the lawyers decide for you, you will find that you won't be able to do much of anything. And you probably will miss out on opportunities. And after the third or fourth contract, you'll actually know what all this stuff means. So just read it and do it yourself. I hardly ever engage a lawyer these days. And the last one is, of course, please don't be in a hurry. Please don't be in a hurry. Please don't be in a hurry. If you think it's going to disappear unless you sign it right now, let it go. If that's the feeling you're getting from the other side, that unless you sign this, this deal's going away, let the deal go. Because there's something wrong here if they can't wait enough to read it and understand it and make sure you've got it. Now, if you're sitting on it for 4 weeks because you just can't decide, that's a whole nother story. But if you've had it for a reasonable period of time, or if they've only just given it to you and say, I need this signed by tomorrow, you say, okay, good, see ya. I don't care how much money it's worth. If it really was that valuable to them, that was just a pressure tactic. And they'll say, oh, okay, never mind. How much time do you need? Because I've done that, right? When people have put it in front of me and said, I need this tomorrow. And I say, well, great, I'll see you later. I'm not going to be able to do that. How much time do you need then? Great, I need a week. Okay, that's all it takes. Just don't accept anything as gospel truth and take it the way you need to. You manage the process, you manage the timing, you manage the thoroughness of which you look at it. And then ultimately you manage negotiating it if you have to change it, right? Because if someone's handing you a contract that they've completely formed, you are going to have some things in there you're going to want to change, and you're going to need to. Right, Carrie?
Yes, sir, ma'am. Yeah.
She just started doing that now. She's like, I negotiated a contract the other day. I'm like, good, because you should, right? All right, so this is a big download of stuff that's in a typical business contract. Oh, I'm reading the thing about the lawyer. Yes, being a lawyer in attendance. Yes, absolutely. Would the lawyer like to speak on behalf of lawyers, actually?
Yeah, there's a couple here, so go ahead and speak up if you need to.
Yeah. Would any like to speak?
I'll speak. The only point I would make is I think the points are valid, except there may be some of the generalizations of how attorneys view some of the same issues, and what they do or don't give advice on in terms of how people take risk.
And I would say, yes, that there is a wide range of attorneys I've met over time, some of which are very, very good about saying, if you do this, this will happen. If you do this, this will happen. And they're wonderful for that. Here's your options. Here are the outcomes that could happen. And then there are others that just redline the entire contract just for the fun of it, as far as I can tell, because they like different language. And now you're trying to figure out, well, is that really important, or was it just your preference, right? And those ones make life hard, but yeah, I hear you.
For everyone.
You're not one of the latter. Thank you. Yeah.
Go ahead, Z.
Well, I think that attorneys want to do the very best for every one of their clients. And please don't diss attorneys, because we work really, really hard to have good results for every one of our clients. Thank you. I'm done.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what I'm trying to encourage people to do is, if you engage the attorney, that it isn't the attorney's job to figure out what the right contract is, the right agreement, the right terms of that. That's the business person. They've got to figure out if that's okay.
You mean their own level of risk? What level of risk?
Yeah, what level of risk are they going to take? I would appreciate when the attorneys can say, if you do this, this will happen. If you do this, this will happen, right? If you do this, or if they say this, that's what they're going to be doing. Because at the end of the day, it's really a business decision to decide whether that liability that they've decided to throw on your end of the plate, is that okay? Do you want the terms to read this way for, they get off the hook for everything and everything is an act of God, even if, they decided they didn't want to pay you? I've seen those kind of contracts, right? My choice to not pay you is an act of God, so you can't get me for that. That's just crazy, right? But some people will accept those terms because of something else is in there. I'm not saying that they should. I'm just saying that that's their choice, right? At the end of the day. But alerting them that that is not a normal way to write that is a good thing. Like that would be beyond act of God. But yeah.
Dr. Yanyo, I tend to like to refer to attorneys. And so like an example that's coming to mind right now, I have a client that is considering an international investment. So I'm a CPA for those of you that jumped on after my intro. And I don't get to, just like everybody in this room, you can wear a bunch of hats. International tax isn't one of the hats that I wear on a regular basis. So I am interested in referring this client for like a tax consultation, but I know fees are going to be sensitive. So we were talking about price in the previous block of slides, and service professionals often feeling sensitive. There are reasons we as service professionals feel sensitive about our pricing, and that would be some of the feedback that we've had in the past. But that said, it doesn't change the fact that it's important. So I am actually trying to set up a consultation. One of the ways I try to get people to consider it, even when they're considering, say, a business valuation, and my end of things is as a percentage of the overall investment that you're considering. Do you have advice on how to approach that? So like this tax acquisition could be $28 million in revenue. So it's not really the end of the world to spend $25,000 or $30,000 on a tax consultation to get the business set up just right, is where my head's at. But a lot of times that's not where the business owner is. Is there a rule of thumb or some wisdom you can share on that?
So my first piece of thought on that is, and what you say about the percentage of the cost relative to the risk and the potential payoff of the product or the outcome, right, seems rational. That doesn't mean humans are rational ever, right? But they have skewed perceptions and they weight things differently. Everybody does. But there's also your option always as a business owner to decide not to take certain customers. You don't necessarily have to fire them, but you can just decide that they're not your people and you're not going to work with them or sell to them. They can volunteer who they are by not choosing to pay your price. And that is an easiest way to not have a customer that you don't want, which is to simply raise your price so high that I don't want them anymore. And if they still want me to do this work, well, okay, I'll take it begrudgingly, but I'm going to charge you 5 times more because of I don't want this business, but you'll do it, right? On the flip side, if they don't want to pay your price for something that you think is a reasonably priced service, why would you want them as a client? Why would you want to argue with them or convince them otherwise? Maybe they're not smart enough and knowledgeable enough about what others might charge that they need to go visit with some of your competitors and get quotes. One of the best ways to, no, because now we're going to selling, but one of the best ways to get people to appreciate you and your pricing is to not try to convince them that you are better and your pricing is better, but to simply give them questions they should ask the competition and get the answers that they get from the competition. And then they will come back to your door because you know what the answers from the competition are. They don't do this, they don't do that well, and they're going to charge you this much more. But they won't believe you if you say it. They can only do this by finding it out on their own. They have to educate themselves and make it then an educated, informed decision about who they're going to choose as a provider of services or of materials. And if you can help them get smarter by giving them questions they should be asking others. And the way you do that is, well, we do this. I'm not sure, you might want to ask whether someone else can do whatever, right? And then if that entity can't do that. When you talk about, so it's a whole nother section about just being able to say, what is your value proposition? My value proposition is, unlike my competitor's product, my product does this. And it's proved by this. Right? You fill in the this is, and that's your value proposition. So unlike my other competitor who would advise you on this international agreement, I am going to these things, and you can look at my references where I've done this before, and here's what I have. They can take that statement and say, okay, well, I'm going to go ask somebody else who can do this and see what they say. And they might find that there's something better in the market and you'd like to know about it. So you always want to ask them please to let me know where you decided to get your services or not, and then they'll be back to you. And of course, your price as originally given, just to put a fine point on it, your price has an expiration date. So if you quoted them to do this work, it was for the next 30 days. If they choose not to take your price in that 30-day period and they go off and they learn and they get smarter and they come back and they go hat in hand, oh geez, I really like to hire you. Great, I'll be able to provide you with a new quote. That price will be higher. It better be higher, right? They need to learn the lesson that they didn't need to do that and drag their feet, right? You're the best one, you've told them that. So go get your money. It sounds brutal when I say this, but this is the coaching that I try to do for folks when they're uncomfortable going and getting what they're worth. Again, you only get the opportunity when you get the opportunity. So you do it, right? Okay, so in this next list for all of my attorney friends, thank you so much for everything. I please don't think that I don't love you all, I do. But I want to make sure that the business people own their decisions. Go get the information they need, but they own it. So here's a bunch of things that are going to be in a typical contract. This is not the complete end be all and end of the list, but there's so much here already that if you haven't been reading contracts for a while, you're going to start wondering why you want to go down a row of a business that would require that you put a contract in place. So I'm just going to click through these things because time is getting short, right? So there's a purpose in your agreement. There's definitions because new words might be formed or created or used differently in your agreement. There's responsibilities for each party and what they're supposed to be doing. Who are they? How do we get to them? What's this about confidentiality and privacy and intellectual property? That's usually about that. Your payment terms, which is what people typically think of as the contract, but inside this price, due dates, late payments, acceptable methods of payment, conditions under which the price might automatically change, which is a wonderful thing to put in place, communication methods for changes, expiration of pricing, as I remember, don't forget to expire it. And then in the other line, supply. So how is the thing that you deliver getting to people? If it's an object, delivery and who pays for delivery, who owns it at what point in the delivery process, particularly if it's going across international boundaries, how is quality defined, how is quality delivered, what are your warranty terms, how are claims reviewed, who pays for what, and that, what are your limitations to liability, what if there's a breach, who pays for what, how does that happen, how do you resolve disputes, what's your governing law, who's going to mediate if not, what's your location for that, how do you terminate the agreement? And it should be in there that the agreement can terminate in various ways. You don't want something that goes forever unless it's in your advantage to you. And then just a bunch of things that go along with it. Being able to assign it if the business is sold, the severability, if this is the entire agreement and nothing else is in here unless I decide to change something and then it's in writing. If something else is decided that isn't legal, the rest of the things survives. All of that stuff is at the end, right? Okay. That's a lot of stuff. And that's why these are really long documents. And then when you read them, you might have to do it in more than one sitting or with lots of coffee or bright lights. That's helpful. What can you lose? How do you lose money in a contract? Well, it isn't in that price line. That it is in so many places. So here's my little cheat sheet of where you really need to read in your contract what you have. Right? These are the things in yellow that I'm going to click through. First is intellectual property, which doesn't mean patents. It means know-how, trade secrets, things that you would rather no one know what you have. And you might have to tell the person who's buying things, or they might get that information from you in this contract. So you want to have some teeth in this. It's not like a confidentiality agreement, but it could be. The confidentiality agreement just says, I promise that if you tell me something, I won't tell anybody else for some period of time, but usually has no penalties associated with that, which means, here's a question I'll always ask you. So you've signed an agreement and it has no penalties for doing the bad thing. Does that stop you from doing the bad thing? What do the attorneys think?
If I understand your question, nothing necessarily ever stops somebody from doing the bad thing. If they're going to do the bad thing. But if you signed an agreement,
this is the one I'd love to have your opinion. This is one that we've lived with forever. So Mark, thanks for stepping into this without knowing what you're stepping into. A confidentiality agreement typically will say, you know, we're going to share information with each other. It's going to be either written or verbal. Hopefully it's all written, but verbal could be in there. And you promise, and all of the people in your company promise, even though I don't know any of them, but they're big, that you won't share this information with anyone outside ever for the next 5 years. Let's just put a time limit on it. And then both parties sign that. So if one party shares the intellectual property that was shared, what can the other party do about that now?
Well, it still would be a breach of a material term, so theoretically you could sue for damages. Now, typically, proving damages on something like that is a little more difficult. So obviously, you would also be trying to enjoin further things. But typically, a non-disclosure without a series of non-use provisions, as well as to how the information may or may not be used, or without some form of a liquidated damages provision, is certainly not sufficient, really.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. So whenever someone puts that document that they've downloaded from the internet, this is probably going to speak to you too, Mark. When they've downloaded that document from the internet, that this is a common confidentiality agreement, everybody just use this one, right? And I read these, so I read them all thoroughly, and I have yet, except for one time in my entire career, read one that had some teeth in it that said, hey, if you do it, this is what's going to happen to you, right? But previously, it's just, well, one, you got to prove that it was them that leaked it, and two, then you have to prove damages, right? On top of all of that. So what was the whole point of intellectual property as a confidentiality agreement ever there? Whenever I do technology projects with folks, I look them in the eye and I say, tell me why they need to know. And if you really, really think they need to know something that we would never want leaked, well, let's figure out how to take that teeny tiny bit of information and make that the part of the conversation. Not something broad where you're just going to talk blah, 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 blah over coffee one day and say something and say, oh yeah, but it's under CDA. And then no, it's that important. So just don't share. Don't share anything that you don't want to ever have be shared unless you absolutely have to.
I was going to say, that gets back to the point of, if you're going to have confidential information, not only define it specifically, but then treat it as confidential yourself.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in today's day and age, too many small businesses release their own confidential information in their sales documents or on their own website or something else in terms of generating interest in their information. And if you've leaked it at all yourself, then the agreements you have about leaking it become worthless.
Right. Okay. So of all of the things that you all own, and you actually have confidential information, no matter what your businesses are, you have knowledge that nobody else has about how your business runs, who your customers are, how they behave. That is unique intellectual property. Please don't share it if you don't actually have to. And if you think you have to, then double think that. You really, really have to. Just keep thinking that. Thank you, Mark, for that. I really appreciate it. Okay, under payment, you can lose money everywhere. Price is one of those. But due dates and late payments. How many of you have 100% on-time payment from your customers? No, right? How many of you are better than 80% on time? Not everybody, right? Okay, you can do the math on this. When they're late, and if it was let's just pick a 10% annual interest rate, okay, so, or 12 is easier. So this 1% a month. At 1% a month on whatever they owe you, that's how much money you have given them, not lent them, given it to them. You're not going to get it back. So why are you a bank? Why are you lending to your customers? And if you are going to lend to your customers, then please put that in the terms. Just simply say, if you're later than whatever your payment terms are, I'm going to start adding interest. Oh yes, the large companies will still avoid paying that to you. So if they're a really big behemoth, they'll just ignore you and you'll be subject to whatever it is. But at the next contract negotiation, you get to have a hard conversation about the fact that your prices are going up because you aren't paying on time. Did you want to pay on time? Great. Payments, well, you're probably all aware that if you take credit cards, you're going to lose some money on that. And I know a lot of you in the service industry have started not taking credit card payments for your services, and with an argument that says, I can't take 3% out of my salary that I pay this person, which is a nice argument, but it's still, at the end of the day, doesn't need to be made as an argument. it's 3%. So if you want to take credit cards, just assess that on top of the payment that you're going to be charging them. You want to pay by credit card? Great. I'm going to add 3% your total. Feel free to pay by credit card. Easy peasy, right? Conditions under which the price may change. So in the world of goods that get sold over a long period of time, so contracts get put in place and then supply happens over the next year, but the raw materials might vary tremendously. Last year, but there's actually no year that this isn't the case. It's always happening, but this year probably more than some. You want to have something that allows you to escalate the price without going back and changing the contract. And you don't want to live to something that you don't want to live to. So our construction friends, it was wood before it was metal, right? So suddenly they've got contracts, they've got houses that they've sold with fixed prices and they can't buy the wood, right? That was a bad plan. Now they've woke up to, so we might need to have escalators automatically in there. You just take an independent third-party index that everybody can agree on is something that you can look at. When that changes, the price changes by some increment. Done. Every time.
Real quick, Lynn, we've got a couple stories in real quick.
Yep.
Where we had terms and conditions. So big box store gives you a big purchase order. And in their contract, they've got 90-day terms. The reason why Jade Lending is in business is because these women took these contracts without having Lynn look at them first and realized that they're going to have to front $150,000 to $300,000 on these contracts before they get paid. And Mark can speak to this. When big box stores send you a contract, they will not change the contract, but they will change an addendum. They will put an addendum to it to where maybe you can convince the big box stores to only give you 30 days or prepay. I did a contract not long ago that I required an entire month up front, pre. Okay, so I had $50,000 up front in a bank account that actually but that was one.
All of that is negotiable at the beginning.
Absolutely.
But Carrie's point is, when you're small and the other guy's big, right? Then they have their lawyers and they have a standard agreement they want everybody to sign and guaranteed that the buyer that you're talking to with that standard agreement in hand hasn't even read it. So it's also instructive to sometimes just walk through it with them so they have some sympathy for the person who's going to have to sign this since they've never read it. But if you need to make a change, you will not change that document. That is just not in their process. That will not ever happen because their attorneys don't want to read every contract through to see what this or that has changed. But you can have an addendum that says, item term number 4.6.2 is now going to read this. And then that's fine. But you have to know to ask for that.
Another short story is we had a woman that, Lynn, you can speak to this, that they said they would only pay her one way. It was on a $10 million contract. And Lynn made a suggestion, that doesn't sound right. Why don't you call up this guy's other people that he's done business with and find out how they got paid? They treated her differently because she was a woman and the terms were not in her favor. So she found out that, well, why am I not being treated the same as a guy over here? And she called it, and now they are treating her the same.
Yeah, she was getting paid by check, and checks were always in the mail. They were 4 payments behind when she finally said, what do I do? And I said, well, you just stop performing till they catch up. And so they pulled other people off the work. And of course, that got their attention finally. And they said, what do we need to do to get you back to work? Well, you need to catch up on your payments. Okay, 4 checks are in the mail. She was super excited. And then that Friday, 1 check showed up. She called him again. I only got 1 check. Well, the others are in the mail. And then she's, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? I'm like, are you behind? No, they were already ahead. They were ahead of schedule. Holy smokes. You're ahead of schedule. You're shut down until you're 1 day behind schedule, or you have all your money in hand. And by the way, when you have all the money in hand, you're still ahead of schedule, you put that contract back up for conversation because you're no longer going to work under this term. That's when she learned that the other folks were being paid by wire and she's being paid by check. Oh no, you get paid by wire. Money's in, guys will show up. Money's not in there, guys don't show up. No more of this delay. No more USPS delay, right? Yeah.
I
We
would
have
say
snuck-
too,
I'm sorry, we have snuck up at the top of the hour. I don't want to cut you off. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. I'm sorry, Mark.
no
Just want to
problem.
bring that to your attention. I'm happy to keep going. I just, in case folks need to jump off for lunch, just maybe start to probably close it down a little bit.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mark.
I would simply say, big box stores, large franchisors, whoever, be wary or leery of anyone who tells you that they don't negotiate any of their terms. Because if they do so, that means they have to do it for everyone and they want to keep their uniformity, because there's exceptions to every rule. And you need to test those to some degree. It is true that some people won't negotiate any of their terms. But typically, if the deal is right or people want it bad enough, they're going to find a way to make those things happen if you press. And then on the other side of that, if they won't negotiate any terms with you, don't get caught chasing the relationship as if it might be the only one that ever comes along to make you who you want to be, because the risks there can be very great.
So go back to those rules of pricing, which is if I'm not going to get what I want, then I don't know if I want this. So just don't take it. It will come back. But also ask yourself the question, if not me doing this contract, who else would they hire? In the case of our one friend who had a Lowe's contract, which she signed without really arguing a whole lot about it, I said to her, so I know that they're having a hard time finding installers. Why would you say yes to this? Why wouldn't you say no? Who are they going to hire? They couldn't find anybody but you. She said, you're right. And I said, then this is your day for negotiating. They've got nobody else to do the work. You put it all out there the way you want it. This is the time to negotiate. But as soon as you sign and then more people come into the marketplace, now you don't have that window anymore. But it is what it is. So let me just do a few more things here, Sherry. So supply terms. Who delivers, who pays. There's a whole bunch of Incoterms related to when does somebody own something when it's coming from another place. If you're doing something that's coming in from China or the Philippines or somewhere in Malaysia or from Turkey, and you want to talk more about that piece, give me a holler. I do a lot of importing, and who owns what, when, and who has what risk is important. Also, who has payment for what by the time it happens. So, and all this ugliness that's happening at the border, whether ships can't come in, is a whole nother issue that you want to now have to negotiate, because that wasn't in most people's contracts. And now it's obviously a problem. Quality, if you deliver bad quality, what happens, which is kind of under warranty terms often too. Who reviews the claims? I've seen documents from very large buyers that say, we will decide if we don't think the product meets quality, and then we'll ask you to reimburse us. We will decide. It will be at our own discretion. Line that one out. Nope. Who pays for this? And a big part of that is if your product, your poor performing product causes some other damages, you don't want to be responsible for that. That's in the liability space. I don't really want to have any liability for a product that went into another product that got used by somebody else that eventually killed somebody. I'm going to be responsible for the cost of my product. That's all I want to be responsible for. I'll refund you the cost of the product, but you cannot take me down for all the other stuff. Again, there are lots of companies, particularly if you're in automotive, that are going to push that liability all the way down to you. And you might not want to take that business on because that's too expensive. But it's a bit that will take you out if you don't have that covered. Breach. So what happens if they breach? We talked about this earlier for confidentiality, but what happens if they just don't pay you on time? What happens if they don't provide you what you need when you need it for information? Make sure you've thought through all of those and you have something in there that you agree that's the solution to it. That'll keep you from mediation or other lawsuits. Just understanding what that is. Do they have 30 days to cure whatever that is? And the last one is, if you're going to resolve dispute, where is it located? Again, international companies might have your location in another country that you'll have to do your dispute resolution. That's probably something you don't want to agree to either if you can avoid it. Not all of these are equal ever. Some are more important than others, and it always depends on the contract, but knowing what you have and at the end of the day being able to sleep because you know what you sign is useful. Just the other day I asked someone, so what does your contract say about this situation? And the answer was they didn't know. Oh, really? I'm sure it's in there. So let's go read it. Oh, after they read the contract, they felt a lot better because it wasn't what they thought it was. Oh, good. But see, that's not a good place to be, right? You need to know your agreements. All right, I'm going to shut up now. And I'm happy to stay on as long as anybody wants to ask questions or as long as Sherry will keep holding.
Excellent. And we got started with this just on the subject of, as a CPA, franchise agreements. One of our initial conversations between Karen and Dr. Yanyo and I was with regards to franchise agreements. And it blows my mind how many people don't really fully understand what they're getting into there either. So just so many great opportunities.
Holiday shopping at Amazon.
What was that? What was that? Where did that come from? I don't know where that came from, actually.
That might have been somebody simply turning their microphone on or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it didn't sound like anything. I would note franchise agreements. Yes, be very careful. I've done franchising for 39 years, and the first agreement I ever read was only 13 pages long. The last one I read the other day with attachments was 289. And it's typically, for lack of a better definition, it's like doing a deal occasionally with Rumpelstiltskin. So just be wary.
Mark and I have a definite sister and brotherhood with that, as we shared some franchise discussions and yeah.
I've just seen some, especially some painful ones. We talked a little bit about a colleague of mine that's locked into a 30-year, here's everything the franchisor gets and nothing for the franchisee. And it's a really long, painful term, and just very, very sad to see people go down those paths. Again, getting back to that is one of the reasons why I would refer. I love your point. The more you read them, the more comfortable you get with the contract language, but a lot of people are going through that the first time.
Yeah.
We have serial entrepreneurs, but I think we have a couple serial entrepreneurs in this room. Most people probably aren't going down that path. And so just being able to have somebody that can help them navigate the language, I think is helpful. And this is huge.
Yeah, but I would still say, if you've never read a full contract and you're going to go into it, do not ask the attorney to read it with you first. Read it by yourself. Read it. Highlight and underline what you don't understand, even if that's every single line, but read it yourself before someone does this. And one of the annoying things I find when someone hands me a contract to sign is that they'll say, so this is the form that says that you agree to this HIPAA thing and that you'll do this and this and this. Okay, I don't really care what you've just said to me. It could be a complete lie, or it could be exactly true. What matters is what the document says, not what you say the document says. So even if I go to an attorney and they describe to me what each of those say, it's really, really helpful to just read the language first. Try and get through it. You're all smart people. You run businesses, right? And it's ugly, but it's worthy. It's worthy to know that, because the attorney is not going to have to live with what you sign. You will.
Yeah. What does this mean? We talk about that a lot in Paralink. The basic, very simple concept of working in the business or working on the business. Reading your contracts is an on the business task. And if it's not what you've gone into business for, which most of us here, that's not what we've gone into business for, that on the business task, that one in particular is pretty overwhelming, but get through it once and really get that at least foundational understanding that you need. And it's going to make a big difference in the decisions that you make moving forward. And just getting everybody to be willing to take on those steps is important. There's a lot of, any big questions here?
One quick thing that I've learned from Lynn that has resonated with me is that when you get a contract and you know that it is difficult to negotiate that contract, that standard contract, it is much easier to put an addendum with the contract than to change the original contract. Let me say that again, because you will beat your head up against a wall with someone that has that original contract. But if you ask for an addendum to put with it, they are much more likely to say, sure, we can add that addendum. We can add that. So
Just another way around having that conversation.
another way around.
Or put it into whatever there's always, attachments. It's an attachment. In attachment D, we're going to tell you exactly how you're going to be paying for this pricing, right? That kind of, right?
And if any of you want to know a little bit more about Jade Lending, Lynn shared a little bit about it, is we've got, we're always looking for accredited investors who want to invest in the fund. And I think we start out, well, I know we start out with that at 50,000, and I think Lynn shared a little bit about that. But if you want to invest with purpose, we have a lot of these women on the call here are not only investors but also our borrowers. So we're here to help. I think we're good, Sherry.
So too, thank you very much, everyone, for your time and attention today. And as Carrie and Dr. Yanyo shared, you're welcome to follow up with them or with me, depending on who you have contact information with. I can get you connected. And thank you both so much for your time and the great information. Lots of positive feedback I've seen in the chats. And appreciate
And Carrie and I are going to be inviting Mark to join the next presentation. Thank you, Mark. Ah, good. I got a smile. Okay, he's in. All right.
I thank Carrie for inviting me today, and that I could be on. So it was interesting information.
Thank you. Thank you.
Happy holiday season to everyone. Take
Thanks
care.
to everybody.
Thank
Happy
you.
Thanksgiving.
This was great.
Oh, good. Thanks. Good to see you again.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. And I think that we've got, Lynn, I would love to set up a date to get you to do this presentation at the Athena International level. It would be fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a hard time seeing it, completely fresh anymore. But every time I have a young person who's starting business, I get to see their questions again. And I think, and these are not taught. This is not a class ever, right? Unless you take it at a very senior level. We've got, should anybody want the pricing Bible? Oh my gosh, I have the woman who can teach pricing and she is killer. She used to do pricing for DuPont. She was awesome. She's a great class, but contract negotiation, that is just, I haven't even found that course anywhere.
Yeah.
Happy to do it. Just let me know, Tracy, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I'll reach out. Thanks. And talk to you again. Talk to you, Sherry, soon.
All right. I just want to say thank you again, Sherry, for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.